If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe. One relatively obscure historical event that occurred in January is the Great Brinks Robbery in Boston, Massachusetts, on January 17, 1950. While the event did not take place precisely on New Year's Day, it is closely associated with the beginning of the year 1950. The Great Brinks Robbery was one of the largest heists in U.S. history at the time. A group of armed robbers, many of whom were former members of the military and had criminal backgrounds, stole $2.7 million, equivalent to over $27 million today, from the Brinks Armored Car Depot. The depot was considered highly secure, and the audacity and precision of the robbery were notable. The robbers meticulously planned the heist, taking advantage of the New Year's holiday when police presence was expected to be reduced. They disabled the alarm systems and took advantage of their knowledge of the depot's operations. The perpetrators wore identical navy blue coats and chauffeur hats to appear as employees when entering the facility. The Great Brinks Robbery remained unsolved for several years, and the stolen money was not fully recovered. It wasn't until 1956 that a breakthrough in the case led to the arrest and conviction of several individuals involved in the heist. The event became the subject of books, documentaries, and films, and it remains a notable episode in the history of American crime. The Great Brinks Robbery was an armed robbery of the Brinks Building in the North End of Boston, Massachusetts, on January 17, 1950. The $2.775 million, $33.8 million today, theft consisted of $1,218,211.29 in cash and $1,557,183.83 in checks, money orders, and other securities. It was at the time the largest robbery in the history of the United States and has been called the crime of the century. The robbery remained unsolved for nearly 6 years, until estranged group member Joseph O'Keefe testified only days before the statute of limitations would have expired. Of the 11 people involved in the robbery, 8 would receive life sentences after a trial, with 2 others dying before they could be convicted. Less than $60,000 of the more than $2.7 million stolen would ever be recovered. The robbery received significant press coverage and was eventually adapted into 4 movies. Perpetrators. Joseph McGinnis. According to O'Keefe's testimony, McGinnis was the mastermind behind the robbery. However, this was later disputed by Geoghegan. 2. He was responsible for destroying incriminating evidence, including guns, the truck, and clothes. 3. McGinnis died in prison on October 5, 1966. 4. Joseph Specs O'Keefe. O'Keefe died in March 1976, at the age of 67. Anthony Pino. According to Geoghegan, Pino was the leader of the gang. Pino died in October 1973, at the age of 67. Adolph Jazz Maffei. Maffei died in September 1988, at the age of 77. He was the last surviving member of the robbery. Thomas Sandy Richardson. Richardson died in 1980, at the age of 73. Vincent Costa. Costa was released from prison in 1969 after being paroled. He was arrested again in 1985 and charged with cocaine trafficking. Michael Geoghegan. Geoghegan was released in 1969 after being paroled. Henry Baker. Baker died in prison in 1961, at the age of 54. James Faherty. Faherty, along with Geoghegan and Maffei, was released in 1969 after being paroled. Joseph Banfield. Banfield died in 1955, at the age of 45. Stanley Gusciora. Gusciora died in July 1956 of a brain tumor, before he could be tried for his role in the robbery. Planning. The robbery was first conceived in 1947, however, in 1948, after months of planning, the group learned that Brinks had moved to a new location. While the theft was originally intended to be a burglary, rather than an armed robbery, they could not find a way around the building's burglar alarm. After observing the movements of the guards, they decided that the robbery should take place just after 7 p.m., as the vault would be open and fewer guards would be on duty. Over a period of several months, the robbers removed each lock from the building and had a key made for it, before returning the lock. 2 vehicles were stolen, a truck, to carry away the loot from the robbery, and a car, which would be used to block any pursuit. Vincent Costa was the group's lookout and signaled with a flashlight from a nearby rooftop when he saw the vault being opened. After 5 aborted runs, Costa finally gave the go-ahead on the night of January 17, 1950. Robbery. 7 of the group went into the Brinks building: O'Keefe, Gusciora, Baker, Maffei, Geoghegan, Faherty, and Richardson. 14, they each wore a chauffeur cap, pea coat, rubber Halloween mask, and each had a .38 caliber revolver. At 7:10 p.m., they entered the building and tied up the 5 employees working in the vault area. They spent about 20 minutes inside the vault, putting money into large canvas bags. Approximately $1 million in silver and coins was left behind by the robbers. They were not prepared to carry it. The total amount stolen was $1,218,211 in cash and $1,557,183 in checks and other securities. By 7:37, one of the Brinks employees managed to free himself and raise the alarm. Investigation and falling out. Immediately following the robbery, Police Commissioner Thomas F. Sullivan sent a mobilization order for all precinct captains and detectives. 13 people were detained in the hours following the robbery, including 2 former employees of Brinks. Brinks, Inc. offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of those involved in the robbery, with an additional 5% of recovered cash offered by the insurance company. Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, J. Edgar Hoover, took over supervision of the investigation. The only physical evidence left at the crime scene was a cap and the tape and rope used to bind the employees. Most of the cash stolen was in denominations of $1 to $20, which made it nearly impossible to trace the bills through serial numbers. Any information police could get from their informers initially proved useless. The truck that the robbers had used was found cut to pieces in Stoughton, Massachusetts, near O'Keefe's home. In June 1950, O'Keefe and Gusciora were arrested in Pennsylvania for a burglary. O'Keefe was sentenced to 3 years in Bradford County Jail and Gusciora to 5 to 20 years in the Western State Penitentiary at Pittsburgh. Police heard through their informers that O'Keefe and Gusciora demanded money from Pino and McGinnis in Boston to fight their convictions. It was later claimed that most of O'Keefe's share went to his legal defense. FBI agents tried to talk to O'Keefe and Gusciora in prison, but the 2 professed ignorance of the Brinks robbery. Other members of the group came under suspicion, but there was not enough evidence for an indictment, so law enforcement kept pressure on the suspects. Adolph Maffei was convicted and sentenced to 9 months for income tax evasion. After O'Keefe was released, he was taken to stand trial for another burglary and parole violations and was released on a bail of $17,000. O'Keefe later claimed that he had never seen his portion of the loot after he had given it to Maffei for safekeeping. Apparently in need of money, he kidnapped Vincent Costa and demanded his part of the loot for ransom. Pino paid a small ransom but then decided to try to kill O'Keefe. After a couple of attempts, he hired underworld hitman Elmer "Trigger" Burke to kill O'Keefe. Burke traveled to Boston and shot O'Keefe, seriously wounding him but failing to kill him. The FBI approached O'Keefe in the hospital, and on January 6, 1956, he decided to talk. On January 12, 1956, just 5 days before the statute of limitations was to run out, the FBI arrested Baker, Costa, Geoghegan, Maffei, McGinnis, and Pino. They apprehended Faherty and Richardson on May 16 in Dorchester. O'Keefe pleaded guilty on January 18. Gusciora died on July 9. Banfield was already dead. A trial began on August 6, 1956. 8 of the gang's members received maximum sentences of life imprisonment. All were paroled by 1971 except McGinnis, who died in prison. O'Keefe received 4 years and was released in 1960. Only $58,000 of the $2.7 million was recovered. O'Keefe cooperated with writer Bob Considine on The Men Who Robbed Brinks, a 1961 as-told book about the robbery and its aftermath. Films. At least 4 movies were based, or partially based, on the Great Brinks Robbery. 6 Bridges to Cross. Blueprint for robbery. Brinks, the Great Robbery. The Brinks Job.